"Ah, it's you again. What right does a black woman have here? You should know your place." The insulting words of Officer Samuel, it chanted through the courthouse corridor, a place where justice was supposed to be the most equal. Without waiting for a response, he grabbed Athena's shoulder roughly, delivered a burning slap across her cheek, and shoved her against the wall, his eyes flashing with contempt. The space instantly erupted into chaos as the crowd recognized the man who had just laid hands on someone untouchable, Athena Carter, the temporary federal judge. Which state are you in? If your state has someone like Samuel, please comment and tell us how you would want him to be dealt with. The Eastbrook County Courthouse's east parking lot stretched beneath a gloomy sky. Quiet footsteps and car doors closing created the familiar scene of a day's trial coming to an end. In the distance, an elderly black man with white hair shuffled between rows of cars. His eyes narrowed in confusion. He stopped when Officer Samuel Hayes approached, hand resting on his belt, his gaze sharp as if sensing something suspicious. "What are you doing here? Do you have a permit?" Samuel asked harshly, stepping close enough to make the old man instinctively step back. The man stammered, trembling as he pulled a wrinkled parking pass from his jacket pocket. Samuel snatched it, glanced at it briefly, then snarled, "Why aren't you wearing it? Do you think it's normal for someone like you to be wandering around here?" The glass door in the main hall suddenly opened. Athena Carter stepped out in a shirt with a standing collar and dark trousers. Her eyes scanned the scene, stopping at the elderly man being pressed against the car like a criminal. Her heels tapped lightly on the tiled floor, but no one turned their head. No sirens, no introductions. Only a female voice calmly and clearly rising from behind Samuel. "He did nothing wrong. This is a public parking lot." Samuel whipped around, his eyes sweeping Athena from head to toe, a mocking smile curling his lips. "A black woman interfering with the police? Or are you trying to dodge a check too? If you don't want to pay, just say so." Athena did not respond to that remark. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the old man's face before turning to Samuel, lowering her voice, slow but ringing like a hammer striking silence. "I don't need to pay. I just don't like seeing anyone humiliated because of their skin color." The air seemed to freeze. Samuel frowned and stepped close to her, his tone turning threatening, each word striking like a blow. "You think you can teach me how to do my job? Who do you think you are to talk to the police like that?" Another officer nearby, Samuel's superior, glanced over but then looked away. As always, silence and cover-up were preferred to confrontation. Passers-by glanced briefly, then avoided eye contact. No one spoke up. Athena stood tall, unblinking. She said nothing, quietly pulling her phone from her jacket pocket and raising it before her chest. The screen lit up. Samuel paused for half a second, then glanced toward a security camera mounted on a distant lamppost. His face twitched slightly. "I've seen enough," Athena said. Her voice was not loud, but each syllable rang cold and steady. No one spoke after. The old man slowly left, his steps trembling. No one helped him, but his eyes stayed fixed on the woman who had just spoken up for him. Athena turned and walked straight toward the row of cars at the far end. No one in that area knew her name or her position, but something in her attitude and gaze made Samuel freeze where he stood, his hand still gripping the parking pass as if to crush it. A nameless seed had just been planted among people used to ignoring the truth. The internal meeting room on the third floor was sealed with soundproof wooden panels, white light shining down on a long table in the center. 6 people sat on both sides, mostly veteran officers. Samuel Hayes sat at the end, leaning back slightly, his elbow resting on the chair's arm, his demeanor more weary than tense. Before him lay a double-sided report, the corner of the paper crumpled from heavy pinning. The chief read slowly, line by line. "Yesterday, in the courthouse parking area, Officer Hayes questioned an elderly citizen without legal reason. The security camera footage confirms no suspicious behavior from the citizen. The confrontation involved a female witness whose identity remains unknown." He paused, looked around the table, then stared directly at Samuel. "Do you want to say anything about this?" Samuel shrugged, flipping through the report as if it were scrap paper. I thought he was trying to break into a car that wasn't his. Responding according to protocol is what I was trained for. The woman showed up at the wrong time, interfered, and caused trouble. Her attitude was confrontational from the start. Council member tapped a pen lightly on the table, eyes cold. "Do you know who that woman is?" He exhaled sharply, leaned forward. "No, just some meddling woman. Likes to throw moral arguments at the police." No one answered. The question hung unanswered. No confirmation or denial. They left Samuel in that blind spot, withholding any details. The silence lingered long enough to feel uncomfortable. After a moment, the chief nodded slightly. "As a frontline officer, you are expected to maintain professional conduct, especially in areas under public surveillance. Your behavior was not in line with department guidelines." A file was slid toward Samuel. On top was a code of ethics form and a reprimand decision for internal records. He picked up the pen, hesitated briefly at the bold red headline, then signed. The ink soaked clearly into the paper, his handwriting heavier than usual. He put down the pen, avoided looking at anyone, eyes fixed only on the department emblem on the folder before him. In Samuel's mind, the meeting was pure humiliation. A trivial incident exaggerated simply because the questioned individual was black and a stranger had intervened. He did not see his fault, but felt exposed, betrayed by his own unit, fearing public reaction. That feeling ate away at him bit by bit, not as pain, but as unspoken rage. As he stepped into the hallway, his footsteps felt heavy, like leaving a battlefield. A younger colleague stood waiting, looking awkward. Samuel glanced over without needing to ask. He spoke quietly, just loud enough for the other to hear. "She'll regret this. I don't like those black women acting high and mighty. If I see her again, she'll pay." He turned, walking away straight-backed, shoulders twitching slightly each time he passed someone. In his mind, the confrontation was far from over. He still had a list of actions undone. He did not know that the woman he had just underestimated and threatened held the key straight into the heart of the very system he believed always had his back, and that system, for the first time, was quietly waiting for a spark from within. The fifth-floor office lay tucked deep behind a side corridor, its door unmarked, without a nameplate, as if set up temporarily for someone no one wished to remember. Athena Carter entered quietly, closing the door softly behind her. The pale yellow light from the wall lamp fell upon unopened stacks of files. She placed her bag down, opened her laptop, and logged into the judiciary's internal data system, a database accessible only to those with authorized clearance. She typed the first keyword, wrongful handling of subjects, limiting the search to Eastbrook over the past 3 years. The interface returned a list of reported cases of improper questioning and citizen engagement. Most carried familiar notes: insufficient evidence, complainant identity unverified, handled internally. Many forms lacked the victim's name, replaced instead by codes like Citizen A or unverified subject. Athena frowned. A system designed to protect justice was using encryption as if to erase the existence of those once wronged. She filtered the list by officer name. 3 notable cases appeared, all handled by the same officer, Samuel Hayes. Each description was nearly identical: strong reaction to ID check request, signs of minor resistance, ended after officer's warning. In all 3 files, the final approval was signed by the same user account, ID 4408. Athena searched further and found that this account had been disabled since last month. All record edits were made before the account was locked, consistently late in the day when oversight was typically minimal. Opening one specific file, she found that the attached audio statement of a witness could not be played. Checking the original code, Athena discovered the file had been reformatted twice on the same day it was uploaded. This was no accident. It was deliberate sabotage. Someone had intentionally disabled the evidence within the system. Another case showed a whistleblower's report with a blank name field. The name column was completely erased. Yet the content section stated, "Officer Hayes used insulting language and pressured me to admit to a violation I did not commit." The complaint was marked as unverified after 48 hours. Leaning back, Athena's eyes never left the screen. She took a screenshot of all irregularities, saving them in an encrypted folder. Then she created a connection table, linking cases with similarities in timing, content, description, and the officer involved. All showed signs of fading or being obscured, as if what truly happened had never been acknowledged by the system. An unrecorded case was considered never to have existed. A person without a name in the records would forever remain a shadow, invisible before the law. Athena stared silently at the last line of a report. Case deemed unfit for investigation. She did not need to read further. What was clearer than any system note was how each victim's name was erased from collective memory, each insult deleted from the files, each accusation tossed aside like scrap paper in a locked office. This was no longer an error, it was a choice named protecting the image of the department, and that was what frightened her more than any manipulator. The office of Judicial Secretary Tracy Monroe was located in the Southern Administrative Wing, a place known to all but visited by few, unless official business required. The door opened slightly, warm yellow light spilling onto a desk cluttered with papers and a court schedule hanging close to the wall's edge. Tracy was reviewing the afternoon's list when she looked up to see Athena Carter enter. She was slightly startled, but quickly regained her professionalism. "Good afternoon, Judge Carter. I thought there were no changes to today's schedule." Athena did not sit, but stood beside the desk, eyes fixed on the pile of files before Tracy. "I know you've been here the longest. I also guess you handled case A7812 last year?" Tracy paused. A subtle hesitation Athena noticed. She nodded slowly, replying softly. The man stopped at the center parking lot entrance. "The report was closed 2 days later." Tracy put down her pen. "I vaguely remember. Is there an issue?" Athena's expression remained neutral as she opened the marked file, turning to the page with the initial statement. The complainant filled in all the information clearly, handwriting legible, but the name disappeared from the system's conclusion. "I want to know if this happens often." Tracy chose her words carefully. "Sometimes names are removed to avoid duplication, or when complaints are baseless, data may be filtered out during system processing." Athena kept her gaze on her, not confrontational or accusatory, but as if measuring the pulse of someone about to breathe out something unsaid. "I found 3 similar cases, all presented the same way. Coincidentally, the officer responsible was Samuel Hayes in each." Tracy's hand tightened slightly, her thumb unconsciously rubbing the corner of the court assignment sheet. Her eyes shifted away from Athena, settling on the dim light by the window. Her face remained calm, but the defensive mask was cracking. She said nothing, nor did she deny. Athena tilted her head, voice lowered. "I know you're not easily shaken. I believe there were moments you wanted to speak out, but perhaps you understand the cost of that better than I do." She closed the file and stood straight. "I won't ask more, but if you recall anyone who filed a complaint that no longer appears in the system, don't keep it to yourself." No one spoke further. Tracy gave a faint nod. Athena turned toward the door. Just as her hand touched the cold steel handle, Tracy uttered almost inaudibly, "That name. I think they came back, but were later rejected." Athena paused for a single second without turning, then walked away. The door closed softly, a sound so faint only those inside noticed. Tracy sat motionless for a long time, staring at the freshly printed files. The top sheet bore a complainant's name crossed out in red ink. Her hand lightly touched it, not to correct, but as if to confirm whether that name had ever truly existed. Through the frosted glass, the hallway light dimmed, but inside the veteran secretary's heart, a question that had never vanished was taking shape. Since when did silence become a necessary skill to keep one's place in a system born to protect the truth? And if someone truly wanted to reopen that closed door, would she stand outside once more? The atmosphere in Eastbrook Courthouse that morning thickened, as if everyone was holding something unspoken inside. After the incident in the parking lot and the leaked internal clip, the looks exchanged in the hallway were no longer indifferent as usual. Some staff eyed each other cautiously, while others avoided eye contact entirely, hastening through areas once considered the safest. Casual remarks like, "Who is she really?" or "There must be something bigger being hidden," floated amid footsteps and the rustle of files. At the hallway junction leading to courtroom number 4, Samuel Hayes stopped scrolling through the hearing list displayed on the electronic board when he spotted a familiar name, Jamal Robinson. His brow furrowed sharply as he spun around, scanning the crowd until his gaze fixed on a black man wearing a rumpled shirt and carrying a briefcase, calmly walking toward the courtroom. Without a word, Samuel stepped forward, grabbing Jamal by the collar, yanking him back and pressing him forcefully against the gray stone wall. "Do you know what you're doing? If I catch you mouthing off in the courtroom, you'll regret it," Samuel hissed through clenched teeth, his voice low but filled with menace. Jamal did not resist. He looked straight into Samuel's eyes with an unnervingly calm tone. "I was summoned. I'm not looking for trouble. I don't need you teaching me fear." Their eyes locked for a moment. Nearby, a few stopped, but no one intervened. The situation was too familiar for anyone to think they would act differently. From the far end of the hallway, Athena Carter appeared. She neither hurried nor spoke immediately, but observed. In seconds, she recognized the face that had once cornered an old man into a car, now doing the same to a much younger man. "Let him go, immediately," she said, her voice not loud but sharp and firm. Samuel turned, surprise flashing in his eyes. He recognized the face, though before he could recall where it had caused him discomfort, he muttered, "Ah, it's you again," and released Jamal's collar. Instead of stepping back, he took half a step forward, blocking the path of both men. Tilting his head, he looked at Athena as if weighing between disdain and remembrance. Jamal adjusted his collar, gripping his briefcase tightly, but said nothing. His eyes shifted from Samuel to Athena, settling on her expression. Her presence made him feel less alone. Though he had been forced into vulnerable positions before, this was the first time he did not have to endure silence. A security officer passed by, her eyes flickering over the scene before stopping. She approached Jamal, nodded lightly to Athena, then whispered, "I'll escort him to the courtroom." Jamal hesitated for a moment, then nodded and followed the female officer deeper into the building. Samuel did not watch them leave. Instead, he kept his gaze on Athena. He neither smiled nor hissed as usual. He just stood there, eyes narrowed, as if trying to recall a forbidden memory. The hallway grew quieter despite being crowded. Those who had witnessed the scene looked at one another silently, understanding without words. An explosion was waiting to be triggered, and someone's hand had nearly struck the match. Jamal disappeared behind the courtroom door, footsteps fading, but the heaviness remained. Athena stood still, eyes fixed on Samuel Hayes as if waiting for him to reveal his true face beneath the arrogant facade. Her silence did not calm the situation. Rather, it unsettled Samuel even more. He stepped forward, each footfall striking the stone floor firmly. When he was less than an arm's length away, he pointed his index finger sharply at her face, voice low and cutting. "Are you interfering in my business again? Who do you think you are here?" Athena did not respond. She turned as if to leave, but before her steps shifted, Samuel roared, "Don't turn your back when I'm speaking to you." A subordinate near the records desk shouted anxiously, "I think might be someone important here. Hayes?" Samuel paused, then erupted into a dry, harsh laugh. "Her? A judge?" He faced Athena, lowering his voice to hiss each word like clashing metal. "What right does a black woman like you have to sit in that chair?" The hallway seemed to shatter into fragments. Several nearby people stepped back, but no one intervened. They just watched. Samuel grabbed Athena's shoulders fiercely, forcing her entire body against the cold stone wall. His eyes burned with lethal intent, as if trying to drown something that made him lose control. The entire corridor was filled with heavy breaths and the clack of shoes on the floor. Athena remained unmoved, like someone unbroken. She stared directly into his eyes, her breath steady. Her voice rang out clearly, "You are breaking the law in the very house "Of law." Samuel gritted his teeth, his face nearly touching hers. "Law? What rights does a black person have here? You should know your place." At the security desk, a woman in uniform quickly pressed a series of communication buttons. Her face turned pale, hands trembling as she watched the scene. Not far away, an administrative officer hesitated for a moment before raising a phone and starting to record. Murmurs began to spread down the hallway. A name slipped from someone's mouth: Athena Carter. That name spread like ink dropped into water, flowing swiftly and deeply into the minds of witnesses. Those who once thought her a stranger started piecing together memories. The temporary reassignment file, the emergency meeting earlier in the week, rumors no one dared confirm. A harsh announcement came through the internal speaker system. "Judge Carter, please proceed to courtroom number 7. The trial is about to begin." The entire corridor froze. Samuel still held Athena's shoulder, but the fiery glare was gone. Instead, a cold emptiness replaced it, as if he had been lifted from the ground he once owned. Athena slid his hand off gently, without yanking or causing pain. That gesture was a decisive cut. "I repeat, this is your final warning." Samuel stood motionless, hands limp, mouth slightly open but unable to utter a word. He was no longer in control. No one laughed as before, no more whispered compromises. This silence was not for those in power. It was a shift. Athena walked away, each step leaving a sharp, deep cut in the heart of a system that once thought it had identified every threat. The murmurs in the hallway had spread into the administrative area. The video, capturing Samuel Hayes shoving a woman against the wall, had rapidly circulated across numerous internal phones. Although the system had not officially confirmed the identity, some longtime employees began whispering the name previously mentioned in a confidential internal meeting: Athena Carter, a judge specially assigned from the Federal Department of Justice. Courtroom number 7 opened its doors. Athena entered without any reception or introduction. She walked straight to the presiding table, her eyes meeting those who had once looked at her with skepticism. Now they stepped back, silent, as if oppressed by something unexpected. The woman pushed against the wall that morning held authority higher than anyone else in the building. She tapped lightly on the wooden table. "I demand the temporary opening of a session to assess the enforcement of executive authority in the courtroom area this morning." Her voice was clear, not asking for permission, but giving an order. A law enforcement officer stood up, confused, and whispered, "Judge Carter, do you have any written directive regarding this matter?" Athena opened her briefcase and presented a copy of the official order from the Federal Coordination Office, along with a certificate of temporary authority. She did not need to raise the paper high. The clip had done most of the work. She read slowly. "According to Article 6.4, Section 2 of the Interagency Regulations on Judicial Security Control, a judge has the right to immediately isolate any enforcement officer exhibiting unethical conduct and potentially threatening witnesses or citizens within the courtroom premises, pending investigation." All eyes turned to her, the entire row silent. She continued, "Officer Samuel Hayes has used threatening force against 2 separate citizens as verified by footage. I demand the immediate suspension of Officer Hayes's law enforcement authority throughout the courtroom area, effective immediately." The rear door burst open. Samuel stormed in, face flushed with anger. "What? Suspension order?" He glared at Athena. "Who the hell do you think you are to push me out? You think wearing that black dress makes you queen?" No one answered. A senior security officer stepped forward, removing his gloves and standing beside Athena. He looked Samuel straight in the eyes. "The order has been confirmed, Judge Carter. We will carry it out immediately." Samuel took a step back, his eyes scanning those present. No one looked back, no one nodded in agreement. Faces, once familiar, now hid behind silence. He was escorted out of the room, the door closed behind him, the heavy hinge sound echoing deep in the heart. Inside the courtroom, no one spoke loudly, yet everyone knew what had just happened shifted the old balance. Quiet questions began to surface. Why did the system allow someone like her to appear silently? Who sent her? And why reveal her power only now? Athena sat down, not looking at anyone, Ignoring the probing gazes, she opened the next file as if the session had never been interrupted. Yet the others clearly understood. From the moment Samuel was taken away, she was no longer just a deployed judge. She was the one who had pivoted a system too accustomed to silence. The basement housing the data servers was designed like a silent maze. Rows of metal refrigerators holding hard drives stood side by side, white lights shining on gray plastic surfaces, creating a chilling atmosphere stretching to the ceiling. Kevin Marks put on his headphones and typed a command to retrieve system logs from the previous morning. He was tasked with extracting footage from the main corridor related to an officer under temporary suspension. According to procedure, the data should be stored in 2 copies, one original on the storage server and a backup copy on the secondary machine cluster. But when Kevin accessed the root folder, the result was no data found. He frowned. The requested time window was still visible in the system timeline, but the footage had vanished. This was unusual. The system would not automatically delete files without a direct command from a high-level authorization. Kevin checked the access logs. An irregular command appeared, an access session from a temporary account, IDA-27F, exactly 15 minutes after the incident. That account had been locked last week, but was still used to perform deletion and overwriting operations. Kevin immediately disconnected from the internal network to avoid synchronization. He launched raw file recovery software, selecting fragmented search mode. The screen showed scattered data packets, most missing headers, but a faint image emerged. A man in uniform pressing a woman against the wall, pixels blurred but clear enough to recognize the act. That moment needed no sound. The image spoke for itself. He saved the clip to a separate hard drive, created an encrypted copy without naming the folder, only writing a short note, unofficial backup. Kevin leaned back, removed his headphones, and stared at the soundproof plastic ceiling. His mind spun through possibilities. If this clip leaked, someone would trace the technical fingerprint, but doing nothing meant the system would erase a newly exposed truth entirely. He remembered an old meeting when he was new. The previous technician had said tiredly, "Some things disappear not because of technical errors, but because someone wants them to." Kevin reopened the high-level admin interface. He chose to send the data anonymously through the internal encrypted federal protocol. In the recipient field, he did not select a name but the unit code, Special Coordination Office, the only group authorized to bypass normal data management rights. He hesitated a few seconds before pressing send. When the screen confirmed the transmission, Kevin exhaled slowly. He knew this video might never surface again or become evidence no one could ignore. He was unsure what awaited him ahead. It might be a summons, it might be silence. Yet, looking at the bottom right corner of the screen, where the access permission list appeared, he saw the most prominent name, Athena Carter. Kevin stood, pulled the encrypted USB from the computer, and put it in his inner jacket pocket. As he stepped out, the light behind him dimmed, while ahead was the staircase leading to the courtroom, where what seemed erased was beginning to live again from broken fragments. However, the crimes Samuel committed remain unforgivable. The late afternoon light slanted through the window of the 5th-floor office, casting Athena's elongated shadow onto the pale tile floor. She was reviewing trial records related to officers suspected of violations. The name Samuel Hayes appeared repeatedly in the list, but not as a subject under investigation, rather as someone who documented the crime scenes. What disturbed Athena was not his presence, but the absence of any official responses from the complainants. A soft knock came at the door, not too loud but clear enough for Athena to look up. Tracy Monroe stood there, clutching a worn bundle of old documents tied with frayed fabric. Without waiting for an invitation, Tracy stepped inside and closed the door behind her, without looking around or asking if it was a convenient time. Her face retained a calm, professional demeanor, but her eyes held something like a sorrow long suppressed. "We've seen this before," Tracy said, setting the files down on the table. "They always get closed before reaching the courtroom." Athena did not respond. She opened the folder, flipping through yellowed pages, the blue ink still clearly showing handwritten notes. The complaints clearly stated the sender's name, contact details, and detailed descriptions of incidents. Some reported unreasonable searches right at the courthouse gates. Others recounted racial slurs hurled at them. One, a young coordinator, wrote in trembling handwriting that she was threatened she would have no future in the system if she kept filing complaints. Athena closed the last page, resting her hand lightly on the corner of the paper. Within the system, these names no longer exist. Some files only remain as numbers, without any sender. Because they were marked as unfounded? Tracy replied evenly and wearily, or dismissed as emotional reports. Some cases were closed in less than a day. Athena looked at her, her gaze sharp and unhidden. There are 3 complaints related to Hayes. Tracy nodded. And those are just the ones I managed to keep. Most complainants withdrew or were forced to withdraw. No one asked why. The accused officers retained their positions and were even promoted. At first, I thought it was the system's selection mechanism. Later, I realized it was a self-protection mechanism. Athena frowned slightly. Do you believe Hayes is the starting point? Tracy shook her head, staring out the window at the falling shadows. No, he's just a product, one link in a chain that has existed far too long. The room sank into silence. Athena asked no more questions. She gently pushed the files aside, separated a single sheet, and placed it in a secure folder. I will keep the original. But I need one more thing, the name of the final approver before the files were withdrawn. Tracy looked at her for a long time. Something like regret rose in her eyes. Then she spoke slowly. There was someone I once trusted to protect me when I still thought I had the right to speak out. He's still sitting in the command office and has yet to be touched. She turned away without waiting for thanks. The door closed behind her, barely making a sound. Athena stared at the pile of files on the table, and within each page were not just the names of victims, but also the emerging outline of a system that knew exactly who was doing what and chose silence to survive. The morning in Athena's office passed in tense silence. All appointments were postponed to allow time for a single meeting. When the door opened, Captain Vance Lerner entered with his usual composed manner. He walked in empty-handed except for his inherent politeness. A moderate smile played at the corner of his lips, but his eyes concealed any true emotion. Judge Carter, he said in a friendly tone like an old friend, I must say you are running this firmly. This system has gone too long without anyone brave enough to make it face itself. Athena looked up, her gaze not cold but clearly unmoved by the flattery. I want to discuss the mechanism of handling complaints within the internal administrative system, specifically the filtering of files before they reach the inspector's office. Is there any regulation that allows the removal of complainant's name? Lerner sat down opposite her, adjusting his tie, his voice still gentle. In certain sensitive or potentially confrontational cases, the complainant's name may be temporarily hidden to avoid further tension between parties. It's a procedure to protect internal stability. Athena did not reply immediately. She took from her drawer a folder, open to a page, signed by a coordinator who had submitted a complaint. She slid the original document across to him, placing alongside it a system extract missing the name and main content. Is this what you call temporary hiding? She asked without looking away from Lerner's face. He glanced at both documents, nodding slightly as if weighing his response. We follow general guidelines. This isn't outside protocol, just an adjustment in sensitive situations. Athena did not argue. Quietly, she placed another printout on the table, a system access log from an ID recently disabled. The last access led to the deletion of a hallway clip following Samuel's attack. The final approval list bore a signature, V. Lerner. That name lay there like a cold blade in the middle of a conversation just beginning. Lerner looked up and met her gaze. I did not execute it personally. The technical operations are handled by the IT team. I only confirmed the administrative part. Do you know that account was locked before it was reactivated? Athena asked. Lerner was silent for too long. That pause became the clearest answer he ever gave in a meeting. When he stood to leave, his voice no longer as natural as on arrival, he left a vague and ambiguous remark. I hope you continue to do what is right, but also know your limits. Balance is what keeps the system from collapsing. The door closed behind him, not forcefully but heavy enough to echo inside. Athena did not rush to act. She pulled open the right drawer, taking out an internal power structure chart, the diagram she had pieced together from scattered fragments, obscure names in reports, and files never publicly disclosed. She took a pen and circled Vance Lerner's name in red. Her eyes lingered longer than usual, because in that name was not only the role of a commander, but also a sign that this system does not fall because of wrongdoers. It collapses from those who understand the law, hold power, and know how to do wrong without leaving traces. Yet this time, the traces have begun to emerge. The internal data storage floor remained cold and impersonal, white light casting over rows of servers, making the space feel even more barren. Athena sat before the computer screen, her arm resting lightly on the keyboard. After meeting Tracy, she decided to dig deeper into the system, where layers of decisions had been abruptly halted without official explanation. The system returned a single item, marked with a special filter titled PX Filter, not belonging to any public category. She entered a 3-tier authentication code, each unlocking a new interface, old-fashioned, as if designed so no one would accidentally find it. Inside the PX filter was a long list, not of victims, but officers who had been complained about and then handled flexibly. Each record ended with the phrase temporarily no action, awaiting favorable conditions. Athena stared at this smooth excuse before stopping at the first name, Samuel Hayes. Beneath his name were 2 others. A lieutenant previously reported for arbitrary suppression in a predominantly immigrant neighborhood, and an investigator linked to witness statement alterations before a federal trial. Each had a note stating, Level 2 Protection. Monitor subsequent behavior. Athena frowned. The accompanying evaluations briefly described violations, yet no one had been truly suspended. On the contrary, many on this list had been noted as transferred according to career development plans. An attached internal map showed they were moved to less visible media areas or under leaders who were close allies. The suspiciously consistent pattern made Athena understand this was no system error, but one deliberately built from intentional faults. Scrolling down to line 72, Athena paused. A faint name marked Deleted from System. Voluntary termination caught her attention. Curious, she traced the internal email address and found an old letter, sent to Tracy Monroe nearly 3 years prior. It contained a report and plea for an investigation into a superior officer forcing a victim to sign a silence agreement. 1 week later, the account was disabled, and all correspondence vanished from the system. Athena clicked the signature at the bottom of the email, feeling as if she had just touched a crack still unhealed. She printed the entire list, each page thickening with doubt. These names were no longer anonymous, but like sharp pins stabbing a large map where justice was divided by criteria of keeping the necessary and avoiding media stench. Athena's fingers stopped at Samuel Hayes, then scrolled to a line marked No Need for Action, Priority to Maintain Current Position. The system had defined itself as to who deserved exposure and who needed protection. She wrote 3 words in her notebook with bold, steady strokes. Priority list, underlining once, then again. Her eyes no longer looked at the screen, but beyond, toward faces who had once entered courtrooms, spoken the truth, and then disappeared. Priority for whom, and consequences for whom. The question needed no answer, only evidence. The 3rd floor of the administrative building grew unusually quiet by day's end as offices emptied. Athena remained before the screen, scanning through data from cross-department email archives. She was not searching for a specific name, but tracing traces of preset meetings where decisions had been made about who to keep, who to discard, and who fell into the forgotten list. Among an old email thread titled Special Administrative Handling, a strange subject caught her eye. Consultation Invitation, Interdepartmental Operations Coordination Committee, sent 2 years ago, signed by Vance Lerner. Athena opened the letter. The language was formal, yet phrases like strategic consultation, legal orientation, and key staff evaluation support silenced her. At the time she received the invitation, she was handling a major civil case and had politely declined. Now, in retrospect, she realized they did not truly want her opinion. They needed a name to legitimize choices prearranged. She traced this committee in the court's database, but found no related entry. No identification code, no public record. However, by tracking Cinder addresses backward, Athena uncovered an informal organizational structure consisting of representatives from Human Resources, Internal Affairs, and several judges closely linked to the old administration. In the participant list, Lerner appeared again, this time not as an administrative head, but as senior coordinator. Athena opened another hidden file from an old inactive account. It was an internal meeting record without a clear title, yet every line hinted at a long operating model. The 83rd note made her hold her breath. Agreed criteria to retain staff with high enforcement capabilities, despite deviant behavior if it holds tactical value and impacts regional performance. Below were 3 signatures, one of which was Vance Lerner. The other 2 belonged to senior HR figures Athena had seen on the PX filter list. She leaned back, eyes fixed on the screen. Everything fit together. The old invitation was a gentle proposal to cloak systemic manipulation under legal pretense. Those sitting on that council did not make laws. They rewrote them by circumventing core principles to create a gray zone where justice was redefined according to personal interests. Athena returned to her desk, opened the printed list from the day before, marking each name linked to the committee. An unofficial power map emerged, with connections unrecorded in any internal report. She no longer needed to question the committee's purpose. They did not want reform or protect the system. They wanted to build another system atop the existing one. A shadow entity operating by the very light of public authority. In the empty room, Athena whispered, "No one stands outside the law, even those rewriting it for convenience." Then she added a line to her notebook. Redefining law begins with who is allowed to interpret it. On the screen, the invitation remained open, proof that, at one time, she nearly became part of that machine. The secure meeting room on the rooftop had been almost forgotten for many years. Thick glass walls were covered with soundproof curtains, leaving only the cold ceiling lights reflecting off the long wooden table. Athena stood before the control panel, glancing at the attendance list. Everyone had been summoned under emergency provisions. No one was allowed to refuse. Kevin quietly set up the display system. Data diagrams began to appear on the screen. Logs of record edits, revoked access codes, and complaints that had vanished without a trace. Athena spoke little, signaling him to open the previously deleted hallway video. The moment Samuel grabbed her shirt and pressed her against the wall, reappeared, this time impossible to conceal. She held a printed access log, her voice firm. This account made edits 15 minutes after the incident, despite being disabled a week prior. Who approved this? No one answered. Athena tapped the table, her gaze piercing each person present. Some council members exchanged glances. One requested to withdraw due to a conflict of interest, and another turned away as she called the name Lerner. She did not pause. A temporary freeze order on the files of 3 mid-level officers was issued on the spot. From now on, all suspended reports will be reviewed, line by line. No data can be considered closed without re-verification. Everything must be transparent. One of the legal representatives from the police association raised his hand in objection, demanding to postpone the session. Athena looked at him. Who do you represent? Those who maintain the system or those crushed by it? Without waiting for a reply, she demanded all members resigned the confidentiality agreement again, this time at level 4, the tier reserved for special internal investigations. The atmosphere tightened. From the back of the room, a cold gaze watched her. That person nodded, subtly. A message was sent, the phone screen flashing red. Athena knew the power circle had sensed the first strike. The hearing had just begun but the system's reaction would not leave her in peace. That morning, documents from the legal office arrived at Athena's desk earlier than usual. The sender's name was bolded: Lawrence Beckett, the official lawyer representing Samuel Hayes, a name that stirred many storms. Beckett was no stranger to the system. He had stood behind numerous counter-arguments, defending many officers under the guise of lawful duty execution. This time, he represented Samuel under authorization from a conservative police rights protection association. The initial document demanded suspension of the emergency hearing, citing a violation of personal rights of an officer without concluded misconduct. Beckett's tone was sharp and subtle, embedding phrases such as judgment based on emotion, reversed racial bias, and abuse of power under the name of reform. At the end, he did not hesitate to hint at Athena, a female judge, no stranger to personal bias when assessing administrative behavior. She placed the file down, eyes fixed outside the window. The morning's fresh air seemed to prepare for a restless day ahead. Athena responded in writing, citing a special clause in the emergency regulations allowing the hearing to proceed when there was a threat to witnesses and data interference. She attached unauthorized access logs, the deleted video, and Kevin's confirmation of the clip's recovery time. All were presented as a declaration. Not a single line was obscured. Beckett refused to back down. He filed an objection with the state inspectorate and simultaneously issued a 2-page press release. The headline read, "Justice cannot be a tool of emotion." In the middle, he ignited public opinion. A black female judge seeks to use the power granted to undermine the actions of white police officers. Social media began to split. Half believed Athena was doing the right thing, courageous and straightforward. The other half fiercely attacked her, digging into her personal past. The hashtag Justice or Agenda spread widely. The media followed every step of the hearing, commentators analyzing the arguments of both sides like a disguised political showdown. Athena left the courtroom as the morning passed. Sunlight filtered through the long corridor but failed to dispel the heavy feeling. Kevin ran up, handing her a USB with a lowered voice. The system was scanned from an unidentified IP address. Someone is trying to access the secret files. She gripped the documents tightly, fingers clenched. The battle had gone beyond this building. It was spreading, seeping into every branch of the system. But this time, she would not retreat. They had lawyers, media, and associations behind them. She only had one thing: the truth left unsaid, and she would not let it die again. The technical floor, deep beneath the internal archive, retained its familiar coldness. Flickering fluorescent lights hung unevenly from the ceiling, casting a pale glow on a work desk covered with a thin layer of dust. Kevin sat motionless before the screen, the faint blue light reflecting off his glasses. After hours of review, he recovered a data segment with a structure matching the timeline of the hallway incident. However, the software noted frame disturbed, audio signal altered. He took a deep breath and launched the frame reconstruction software. The interface displayed hundreds of broken pixels, data blocks misplaced, compressed, and distorted audio. Carefully, Kevin restored each segment to its original position, sharpening the image using an algorithm that cross-referenced a temporary memory backup. With each iteration, the image became clearer. Samuel Hayes grabbing Athena's shoulder, pushing her against a stone wall, his eyes full of rage. A clear, sharp voice shouted, "Let go!" Then an eerie silence followed. No interruptions, no warnings, no one approaching. Within that moment, Kevin noticed a small detail missing from the previously circulated clip. An officer standing right at the gate turned away, seemingly deliberately avoiding the scene. A security staff member held a walkie-talkie, finger hovering over the call button but never pressing it. This moment lasted less than 2 seconds but spoke volumes. This was no spontaneous violence. It was a trained, collective reflex to look away. Kevin labeled the file video_full_KC, created a copy on a separately encrypted drive, and simultaneously set up an offline backup, with security formatting accessible only by special authorization. The screen's glow had shifted to a late-night blue, as he sat silently for minutes. The question gnawed at his mind. Would sending this clip mean the end of his career? He recalled a mentor's words from the first orientation. You do not get to choose silence if you still see the truth. At the time, Kevin had dismissed it as empty rhetoric, like many slogans hung in the administrative hallways. But now, facing this video and the name Athena Carter, with access rights in the system, he knew he had no other choice. He accessed the internal link, used his special clearance code to send the video to the office registered under Athena's identifier. After several confirmations, a small notification appeared. File sent successfully. Kevin removed the drive carefully, hiding it in the bottom drawer of his desk, yet this time he left a note in the system log, Restorer Kevin Marks, not for recognition, but so that if someday someone wanted to know, there would still be a trace of someone who saw and chose to speak out. The second-floor balcony was empty, the late afternoon sun thinning through the sparse leaves over the lawn. Athena walked slowly, clutching an unfinished file. Jamal stood quietly, his gaze distant, as if searching for something forever lost. The noisy sounds from the floor below echoed faintly, like a separate world disconnected from the stillness between them. She said no lengthy introduction, only quietly asked, "Are you all right?" Jamal nodded slowly but decisively. Without turning, his voice was soft as the wind. "Better than I thought." A silence lingered. Then, as if words had been held back too long, he began to tell his story. 5 years earlier, his brother Malik was arrested while on the way home. A traffic stop with no clear reason. Malik was asked out of the car, and when the cause, he was charged with lack of cooperation. The officer who made the arrest was Samuel Hayes. Inside the station, no cameras, no lawyer. Malik's arm was broken from the beating and he was held overnight without medical records. The family filed a complaint, but the file was quickly returned with the explanation, insufficient evidence of wrongdoing. They were not allowed to meet any independent investigator. No one confirmed the incident except a single line in the internal report, no special circumstances. From that day, Malik was no longer himself. He quit his job, withdrew from friends, and lived quietly like a wound that would not heal. A year later, Jamal entered a dark bedroom to find his brother no longer breathing. On the table lay a folded note, its corner stained with dried tears. "You are not wrong, but you lost." The shaky handwriting seemed rushed, as if Malik himself did not know these were his final words. Jamal finished telling the story, silent as if surprised he could say it all. Athena did not interrupt, her eyes steady. She asked no questions, offered no explanations of right or wrong. Between them, there was no need for condolences. Both understood some losses do not need soothing, but remembering. Jamal turned his head, for the first time looking directly at her since beginning the story. "If you need me to testify, I will. I don't want my brother to become a name erased from memory again." Athena nodded, gripping the file marked with a personal symbol. She did not promise victory, nor say justice would come. But in that moment, between the fading light and shattered memories, both understood. Some truths cannot be buried if there are still those who tell them, and that, not laws, not titles, is what can compel the system to face itself. Meeting room number 4 was bathed in steady white light and in almost absolute silence. Tracy Monroe sat in the middle, facing Athena, along with representatives from the Internal Review Committee. This was the first time in over 20 years she had left her position as court clerk to take the seat of a witness. There was no longer a trial schedule or a red stamp. Only a thin file lay before her, alongside eyes waiting for the truth. Tracy's voice trembled slightly as she began, but never broke apart. She confirmed having directly handled several complaint forms which, after being forwarded to higher levels, were dismissed as lacking sufficient grounds. Among the 5 cases she clearly remembered, At least 2 named Officer Samuel Hayes explicitly. These forms were fully completed with genuine signatures and detailed reports, yet they never reached the review board. Athena did not interrupt but watched silently. Tracy opened the document she had brought, her finger trembling as she flipped pages, then paused on the last one. "This is a photocopy I kept before the file was moved to a hidden status." The paper bore the words, "Request to examine responsibility for racial slurs," specifying time, location, witnesses. The room fell silent as she recounted a private summons. A commander, unnamed in rank, told her that such files were not beneficial to system stability. She was given 2 choices: remain silent and comfortable, or accidentally be transferred to a remote administrative district lacking medical support, while her brother was battling a terminal illness. "I was not silent out of fear," Tracy said, her eyes fixed on Athena. "I was silent because I had no choice left. The system offers choices, but those choices are designed to bind us." The committee representative's final question concerned what made her change. Tracy replied, "For the first time, I felt someone asked me as a human, not as a cog, to be kept silent." Her voice was low, yet each word was clear, as if she had just freed herself from chains worn too long. Athena ordered that the testimony be sealed and stored under Level 1 witness protection, while calling for a full review of all files suspected of being dismissed for lack of verification. Tracy stood, her eyes shadowed but her gaze firm. A young officer moved forward to escort her, but she waved him off and walked quietly away. The door closed behind her, leaving the room in silence. That testimony, though quiet, had sparked the first flame, a fire that would spread to the deepest layers of a system long kept sealed, like a vault. The meeting room remained as somber as previous sessions, but Athena sensed a new layer of emotion threading through every breath. On her table lay a yellowed file, the margin marked faintly, Elijah Rowe, accident of undetermined cause, a name erased from the system but now resurfacing as a silent accusation. Elijah, 19 years old, died from a traumatic brain injury after 3 days under surveillance by unmarked vehicles. The case was recorded as no suspects involved, but Athena had seen a short code linked to the PX filter list, a roster of officers whose records were prioritized for protection from deep investigation. The door opened gently. A woman entered, thin with rounded shoulders, wearing a brown coat worn at the cuffs. Margaret Rowe, Elijah's mother, introduced herself in a near whisper, yet each word cut through the atmosphere like a blade. She requested nothing but permission to speak for my son. In her hand was a handwritten petition, the paper yellowed with age, a corner still bearing the residue of an old stamp. Athena recognized this petition as one of the documents Tracy had handed over that morning. Margaret began to tell her story. There was no dramatic expression or anger, just a clear, uninterrupted recollection. She spoke of the day Elijah was stopped in the street, suspected of reckless driving without evidence. He returned home with a bruised face, his left eye swollen shut. Police said they were checking information and no official record was made. 3 days later, Elijah collapsed in his room, hitting his head hard on the desk. The hospital concluded a brain injury of unknown cause. The forensic file was empty. On the day he died, I brewed his coffee as usual. His cup remained full until the afternoon. Since then, I have left that cup untouched. I fear washing it away will erase everything. She paused, breathed deeply, then looked up, facing the bowed heads. They say no one remembers him, but I have never forgotten. The atmosphere froze. Some tightened their hands on their knees. Kevin, standing by the technical hallway, bit his lip lightly while the note-takers set down the pen. No one could challenge a memory that no one dared keep. Athena rose and walked slowly toward the mother. She took the petition from her hands, holding it tightly without looking at it. Her voice was low but resolute. "I will not let your son's name be erased again." Margaret looked at her silently. Tears fell without sobs. She nodded and turned away. Her back was straighter than when she entered. Her steps were calm but left a lasting echo on the stone floor. Behind the closing door, Athena stood still for a moment. No one spoke or interrupted, for they all knew something had been named again. Elijah Rowe, a name once buried, had now become an indelible piece of the justice puzzle Athena was piecing together from ashes. The atmosphere in the courtroom that morning was thick, as if a storm was about to break. Athena stood by the questioning table, her robe replaced with a plain vest meticulously pressed. Opposite her, Captain Vance Lerner sat upright, his face calm, hands clasped over his stomach, as if attending a routine administrative meeting. Yet his eyes, while composed, scanned each row, searching for reactions from those present. Athena began with seemingly harmless questions, referencing the internal filing classification mechanism, the cross-checking procedures, and the authority of commanders to temporarily anonymize complaints. Lerner answered fluently, each word seemingly rehearsed, citing clauses from the Internal Complaint Management Guide. However, Athena did not nod. She let him continue for a few more minutes before posing the first question not found in the official script. Are you aware that the administrator account with ID number 473 accessed the camera data editing system illegally for 3 hours after the hallway incident? Lerner hesitated, but nodded slightly. I received a technical investigation notice. Athena nodded and pushed the printed access logs toward the panel. That account's actions were approved by a senior-level authentication right. The designation matches your access privilege. A small silence spread like ink on the tabletop. Lerner looked at the printout, then raised his head and spoke slowly. I did not perform it directly. Perhaps someone on the technical team used the privilege on my behalf, but you are the one who signed the final approval, correct? This time, he did not answer. Athena stepped to the evidence table and opened a data sheet containing records of complaint files marked unreliable. She named 4 whistleblowers who had vanished from the system and placed the originals before him. All these documents bear your authenticated signatures. Lerner took one sheet, flipped through it, maintaining a calm demeanor. We have internal guidelines to assess reliability to prevent misuse. Athena stopped, her gaze fixed. Are you protecting the system or hiding what the system fears to face? Several members of the panel looked down. The keyboard tapping stopped. No one mentioned the word abuse of power, but it lingered behind every vague answer. Lerner remained composed, yet a thin veil of defensiveness began to show in his eyes. He said, I believed slight adjustments would maintain stability. Athena turned back, slowly posing the final question. Do you understand the true cost of this false stability, Captain? He did not respond. For the first time, his shoulders sagged slightly. In Athena's eyes, she saw the first crack in an otherwise impenetrable shell. After Captain Lerner partially admitted responsibility in handling the files, Athena's legal team immediately released a batch of documents that Tracy Monroe had handed over the previous week. On the large screen at the center of the courtroom, scribbled lines from the complaints appeared clearly, accompanied by stamps reading, Unreliable. The sender's name was blurred, but at the bottom of each document remained the final approval line, Senior-Level Authentication Rights. Athena did not need to name anyone. All eyes turned to Lerner. Kevin, during the technical presentation, displayed an analysis on the system. The interface was neatly designed, with each data block showing the approver's name, the time of confirmation, and frequency of action. A chart appeared showing that 78% of rejected files over the past 3 years shared the same final approval right, an internal ID matching Lerner's account previously used to access the system. This evidence silenced the courtroom before a murmur began. No one could call it a coincidence. Athena stepped forward, holding a printout of an internal email recently sent to the investigation team. The bolded line read, "We need to protect the department's image. Do not let a few young officers destroy what we have maintained." The server log confirmed the letter was sent from Lerner's machine, just 2 months after Elijah Rowe's case was classified as an unexplained accident. As Athena read the content aloud, no room for excuses remained. Lerner remained silent for a long time. When asked to respond, he spoke hoarsely, unsure if from defense or fatigue. "I only did what was necessary to maintain public trust." Athena looked at him, not angrily, but firmly. Are you protecting trust or choosing what is easiest to hide? Some members of the inspection panel began taking notes, their expressions serious. Legal reporters opened their laptops, typing quickly as if recording a diary before a prosecution. The prosecution requested to suspend the hearing temporarily to review the full list of files rejected for similar reasons. In that tense atmosphere, Athena signaled to play the final recording, a perfect conclusion to the turning point. Clear audio filled the room from a secret meeting 3 weeks earlier between Lerner and 3 senior officers. His voice was unmistakable. Athena Carter is a political risk. She must be controlled before disrupting operational standards. No one in the courtroom spoke. The truth had crossed the threshold of denial. From a cooperating witness, Lerner now became the target of a deep investigation. Lawyers on both sides quickly conferred, proposing to temporarily seal part of the data to serve accountability procedures. Athena did not return to her seat. She stood silently, looking at the evidence board, then left the room as if closing a long chapter. Outside the hallway, a young journalist waited. He did not offer a microphone, but whispered, "So, he was the one protecting the entire system?" Athena did not answer, but her eyes needed no words. They gazed toward the end of the corridor, where the list of names yet to be revealed still awaited, to be gradually dragged out of the shadows. An emergency meeting was held in the conference room on the second floor of the Eastbrook County Police Headquarters. The curtains were drawn and 3 surveillance cameras were temporarily disabled under orders from the federal inspector's office. There were no recording devices, no press transcripts, only 6 people seated around a long table, with a disciplinary decision printed on thick paper, stamped in red at the top. Samuel Hayes was invited last. He walked slowly, back straight, shoulders broad as if trying to maintain a familiar posture in a uniform that had become redundant. His lapel still bore the badge pinned neatly, his gun holstered properly, but his eyes were empty and colder than usual. A representative from the department's Ethics Council spoke decisively. After reviewing the visual evidence, testimonies, and conduct inconsistent with professional standards, we have decided to permanently suspend Officer Samuel Hayes. The suspension is effective immediately. No one reacted. No sighs or murmurs. Everything had been prepared in advance, including the man receiving the verdict. An officer approached, carrying a sealed box containing the badge file and personal firearm. This was someone who had shared coffee with Samuel every morning, once calling him the unofficial captain, now silently offering the box without meeting his gaze. Samuel slowly removed the badge from his shirt and placed it into the velvet lining inside the box. The metallic clink as it touched the bottom was faint, but seemed to suck the air out of the room. He then unfastened his gun strap and placed it neatly beside the badge. As the box was closed, the officer took a deep breath, gripping the edge lightly, as if touching something once solid, but now a symbol of collapse. Samuel stared straight at the chairperson without defense or argument, his eyes fixed instead on the plaque on the wall bearing the department's motto, integrity, responsibility, justice. He chuckled silently. Those 3 words now seemed like sterile hospital stickers, devoid of feeling. His mind replayed recent moments. From the grip on Jamal's collar, Athena's steely gaze, to the murmurs in the hallway when her identity was revealed. Everything he had relied on, power, experience, tacit protection from superiors, had fallen away, layer by layer. Most painfully, he knew he had brought this end upon his hands. No one had stripped power from his hands. He had simply abused it until no one could cover for him anymore. The meeting room door opened. An official invited him out to sign the suspension acknowledgement. Samuel walked into the hallway, hands empty, shoulders bare. He paused for a few seconds before a glass door reflecting his image. The figure was strange. No radio, no name tag, no gun at his side. just a man whose eyes looked as if his identity had been peeled away. He took a few steps, stopped, and glanced back at the closed door. The hinge clicked softly, but in his mind, a different sound echoed, the imagined metallic clatter of his badge falling onto stone, small yet sharp, like a bell signaling the end of a dream of power he once believed eternal. Samuel did not look back again, but on his way out of headquarters, with anger still burning inside, he held on to one thing, memories, and he would use them as his final weapon. Yet, standing alone in the empty corridor, he did not know that not all memories carry the power to save. Some only push one deeper into the abyss, and he had already begun to fall without knowing where to cling. A corner cafe nestled between two administrative buildings, the outdoor light filtering through frosted glass, casting a muted gray tone inside. Samuel Hayes sat alone at a table against the wall, jacket buttoned up, cap pulled low. Before him lay an old file, its spine worn, edges bent from repeated clipping. Across from him sat a young reporter from Pulse Watch, an independent investigative outlet focused on internal abuses within public service. The meeting was without a recording. Samuel set clear conditions. No direct quotes, no photos released, only notes kept in-house until he felt the need to speak publicly. His face did not look like someone just been expelled from the force. On the contrary, his eyes were unusually bright, his voice steady and resolute, as if this was the moment he truly existed. "I know what you want," he began. "You want me to confess, but I won't. I have nothing to apologize for." The reporter nodded slowly, letting him continue. Samuel bent down, pulling out a thinner stack of documents, several loose pages bearing faint watermarks from the internal data system. He tapped his finger on the file's edge, eyes fixed on his counterpart. "They think they can throw me away like a stain, but this stain is from their own hands. I'm just the one who carried it out." Beneath those pages was a list of complaints removed, reports altered, investigations halted prematurely. Most involved officers held command positions or had sat on the department's disciplinary board. Some cases were requested for re-investigation, but the files vanished before reaching the state inspector. Samuel did not disclose how he obtained the copies, but his confident demeanor showed he had kept them for a long time, like insurance for himself. "I've done this for over 10 years, he said. "I don't make decisions, I just follow orders. Who would think someone like me could write reports, close files, they approve, they sign, they command?" The reporter straightened, whispering, "Do you plan to make this public?" Samuel sneered. "Up to them. If they think I'll stay silent for some peace, they're wrong. I lost my badge, but I still have a voice. And this time, I'm going to use it." He stood, leaving the sealed file on the table. Before the reporter could say more, he slipped out quietly as he had come. But shortly after, a photo of him sitting beside the file was snapped by a waiter and posted on an internal forum for former officers. The image spread quickly. Samuel sat sideways, jacket buttoned high, one hand resting lightly on the dark file. The caption, typed hastily by an anonymous account, read, "He lost his badge, but not his voice." Messages flooded the newsroom from many directions, some fearful, some challenging, but most asked the same question. How much does he have, and how far will he go? The storm Athena Carter had warned about seemed not to come from the system, but from the very people the system had once used as tools. And Samuel Hayes, with all his unwashed sins, was turning himself into a mirror no one wanted to face. Courtroom number 3 was quieter than usual that morning. The rows of packed seats seen in prior hearings were absent, and the cameras that once captured every moment were gone. Yet everyone remaining shared a common thread. They had been witnesses, filed complaints, been asked to remain silent or quietly erased from the system. Some sat near the aisle, heads slightly bowed, hands clasped together. Others kept their eyes fixed on the judge's bench, where Athena Carter reviewed the final records. Samuel Hayes stood at the defendant's position, chin raised, shoulders straight. His face showed no expression, his gaze vacant, directed at Athena as if the accusations no longer held weight. He had heard it all before, from the media, colleagues, and those who had patted him on the back after each time his force exceeded what was necessary. Today, he heard it again, this time from the victims themselves. The defense attorney pleaded for leniency, saying, "My client has no prior record. His reaction was under the pressure of duty, motivated by the desire to ensure public safety." The argument fell heavy like lead. The victim's representative quietly presented a list of Samuel's cases over the past 7 years, names marked as insufficient grounds, accusations filed under closed cases, just when everyone thought the presentation was over. A middle-aged woman stood from the back row. Her voice trembled but was clear as she recounted her 17-year-old son being held at gunpoint by Samuel in the schoolyard due to a matching description of a suspect of color. She did not cry, yet her words silenced the room. Since then, he has never looked a police officer in the eye again. Not because he feels ashamed, but because he feels ashamed. Athena did not ask her to stop. She listened. Then, folding the file before her, she stood and scanned every face in the room, each person contributing a piece of their memory to the discarded files. The court finds the defendant guilty of serious ethical violations, causing psychological and reputational harm to numerous innocent citizens. The room held its breath. Everyone awaited a prison sentence, a concrete penalty, but Athena continued with a firmer, resolute voice. "The court orders the defendant to handwrite an apology to every complainant, every person erased from the system, every file faded or obscured. Each letter must be written after thoroughly reviewing the original records. This is not for formality, but so you understand what you have taken away." A ripple of murmurs spread gently. Some frowned, others sighed, and some looked at Athena skeptically. Yet she did not waver, her gaze fixed on Samuel. No sentence is greater than facing oneself. Every word spoken, every act committed without excuse. That is what I want you to take away. Samuel showed no reaction. He gave a faint, crooked smile. Yet in his eyes, something stirred. Faint, small, but present. The court decreed the order to be executed within 48 hours, starting from the recovered files. When the hearing ended, Samuel left the room unshackled but carrying nothing with him. The door closed softly and decisively behind him. In the hallway, Jamal leaned against a pillar, silent. Their eyes met. No one bowed, no anger flared. Jamal only looked, then quietly turned away. In that look was neither forgiveness nor hatred. It was true, and it always arrives when one believes they have lived long enough to ignore it. Athena's office was bathed in the last light of day. She stood by the window, eyes tracing the stone courtyard below, where a few staff tidied the week's final files. On her desk lay stacks of old complaints, originals once erased from the system, now recovered and freshly printed by urgent order. The paper was yellowed, some text blurred by water, some names long departed from the city. Yet all remained, fragments needing to be pieced together to complete a truth never spoken aloud. Tracy Monroe entered, holding a list of those who had confirmed receipt of apology letters, if any. The first 16. They do not want compensation, only an acknowledgement. Athena nodded and took the list without opening it immediately. Tracy hesitated. "Do you really believe he will write?" Athena did not turn around, her tone steady. "I believe no one can live forever with memories of those they tried to forget. Eventually it returns, one way or another." Tracy placed her hand on the edge of the desk, eyes lingering on a sealed envelope without an address. "I used to think I was just doing my job, scheduling, recording minutes, filing reports. But looking back, what was left blank far exceeds what I ever filled." She paused, then blurted out, "Is this system too good at turning people into silence?" Athena looked up. "The system does not need to speak. It only needs us to stop asking questions. And when someone starts to ask, it isolates them by any means." Their eyes met, not with anger or blame, but a delayed understanding. Outside in the hallway, the steady tap of footsteps echoed. Journalists from smaller outlets began to retreat. As the evening news aired, the trial concluded and attention shifted elsewhere. But for those involved, the echoes did not fade so easily. A bold young reporter stood by the elevator, asking as Athena approached, "Judge Carter, are you worried the sentence is too light and public trust in justice will erode?" Athena paused. For a few brief seconds the space felt thick, as if the trial had replayed in the office lobby. She did not evade. Her voice was clear, not loud, but each word was weighed carefully. No prison can imprison conscience. If anyone lives without hearing its voice, then all sentences become meaningless. She then turned and left without waiting for another question. That night, in a small rented room in the city's west side, a dim desk lamp illuminated Samuel Hayes's weathered face. He sat, pen shifted aside, a blank sheet before him with some cross-out lines. An open file lay to his left, showing names of past complainants and copies of letters once excluded from records. He did not yet know what to write. His hand hesitated with each line, but for the first time since being forced out of the force, he answered to no one, edited by no one, written for no one but himself. Every word about to be penned was his own, marking the start of something he once thought impossible, answering for the past in his own voice. Not loudly, unpaid, not needing belief, but this time, truly. That morning at the state inspector's office, an anonymous email unexpectedly appeared in the encrypted inbox dedicated to internal complaints. It had no subject, no sender address, only an attachment named North Corridor Report, March 4th. Staff initially considered deleting it, as most such messages were spam, until the system verified that the attachment followed the internal report format, an old template from Eastbrook County Police Department with a user code from a staff member, valid under the security standards from 3 years prior. The report spanned 4 pages, detailing an unlawful interrogation that occurred late in the spring workday 3 years ago. A 16-year-old youth was held in the clinical detention hallway for matching the description of a suspect. There was no detention order, no summons, and the victim's name was absent from any subsequent record. The officer responsible was clearly identified as Samuel Hayes, and the case approver was Captain Vance Lerner. At the end of the report, a handwritten note was copied from an internal log at that time. "I asked if additional reporting was needed. They said, keep it brief, then submit, the rest will be handled." No signature appeared below. The reporter's name field was completely blank, with only an access device code, MJ 1904. Within the extended email content, a short paragraph was written. In a hesitant, broken style, "I used to think it wasn't big enough for anyone to care. I thought if I spoke up, I'd lose my job and everything I had just started. But I saw that boy's eyes, and I still remember. If anyone still believes justice begins with truth, this is mine." A copy was sent to Athena Carter just hours later. After reading the last line, she said nothing. Her finger paused on the device code, her eyes shifting from caution to focus. She searched personnel records for Eastbrook from 3 years ago, filtering by registered devices. After a few checks, a name appeared: Malik Jordan, a trainee police officer who started work that March. He left the force after 6 months, citing resignation and discontinuation of training. Athena slowly leaned back in her chair, recalling similar cases she had recently reviewed: victims erased from records, corrupted audio files, complaints never reaching investigators. Every sign pointed to Samuel Hayes. But this time, the link to the past didn't come from a meeting or a public testimony, but from someone who had been taught to stay silent and finally refused to remain quiet. She printed the full report and sent copies to the State Investigation Office and Eastbrook's Internal Affairs, requesting an urgent case reopening. In her note, Athena wrote only, "This report is not merely an old file. It is a witness erased from collective memory." Before leaving the office, Athena reopened the anonymous email and reread the final paragraph. She then looked out the window. Outside, the midday sun lightly shone on the roof of the opposite building. She did not know whether Malik Jordan still lived in the city or had left for good, nor did she know if he was following recent trials or was simply driven by conscience. But Athena believed that whoever he was, what he had done reminded this system that some people need no title or rank to create a starting point for justice. A soft sound came from the door. Tracy Monroe entered, holding an old court calendar. "You should see this page. That year we had a postponed trial due to a lack of witnesses, and the victim's name matches the one in this report." Athena accepted it with a nod. Now she was certain. The case from 3 years ago had been significant enough to surface, but was smothered by the system before it could grow. And now, a voice once forced to silence had begun to resound, at the right time, place, and with the right person, to continue what should have been completed long ago. The file, coded MJ194, was uploaded by Athena to the regional monitoring system early in the afternoon. Simultaneously, a copy was sent directly to the State Investigation Office, accompanied by her handwritten letter confirming that the document once existed in the official system, but was deleted before witness verification. The timeline matched the shift under Captain Vance Lerner's team. The final line Athena wrote in the letter contained just 8 words. "It is time to restore truth to its rightful place." 3 hours later, a response order arrived at Judge Carter's office. According to special investigation regulations, any document improperly removed from the system must be immediately placed under emergency monitoring. Malik Jordan's report, though anonymously submitted, was authenticated via device codes and access logs. This elevated the investigation beyond internal jurisdiction, turning it into a state-level case. Cross-section checks were conducted overnight, shocking the coordination team. 8 other cases showed similar patterns. Reports withdrawn before objective review, or content altered from misconduct to reasonable response in an emergency. All were handled by officers at Samuel Hayes' level, with many approved by Vance Lerner. One file had even been ordered for investigation, but was halted with the reason no longer timely. Athena demanded the convening of an interagency task force, an unprecedented move since her transfer to Eastbrook. The list of past victims began to be recovered from backup archives. Each name reappeared on the screen, marked as "File Closed for Unknown Reasons." She ordered contact with each individual, not immediately for testimony, but to inform them their cases were not forgotten. Tracy Monroe stayed late with Athena, reviewing the old court schedules. One name made them both stop. The victim had requested a public confrontation, but was marked as unfit witness due to mental instability. The original document clearly stated this person was a law student with a valid complaint, but the file was destroyed before review. Tracy looked at Athena and said simply, "We once let this case vanish like it never existed." When the computer screen finally went dark, Athena packed away the reopened files. She was about to leave when the phone rang. The screen showed no caller ID. The voice on the other end was brief and firm. "You will not stop. I see you." The line went dead immediately after, leaving a long silence. No threats, no evasions, just an echo from somewhere deep within a system once sealed by silence. The office lights dimmed. Athena stood alone, opening each returned file. Every page, every line, every erased name now carried its own weight, heavier than any sentence she had ever passed. She read every record, every shaky handwritten note, every halted testimony, everything traced back to a common root. Not one officer, not one commander, but a mechanism that taught people to ignore, to forget, to lighten responsibility through administrative language. Athena sat down, her eyes resting on the first page of file MJ194. Someone who had been silent, now spoken, and that was enough for the system to start responding. After Athena Carter's ruling, public attention had barely settled when a wave of civil lawsuits was filed at Eastbrook County Court. Names previously erased from records began to reappear, no longer anonymous Citizen A or anonymous complainant. These were real people, carrying memories that no internal order could erase. A group of volunteer lawyers from a civil rights organization took on the cases, reviewing incidents once buried in darkness. They called it the Truth Restoration Campaign. Within the first 2 weeks, Samuel Hayes received more than 10 subpoenas. The charges were not criminal but broad and deep: abuse of power, defamation, emotional harm, and unlawful detention. Behaviors once dismissed as insufficient evidence or lack of investigation basis surfaced in copies of documents, handwritten notes, and secretly preserved reports spanning years. Many plaintiffs were people of color who had been forced to withdraw complaints or denied legal access initially. Samuel reacted fiercely. He hired a private attorney, insisting he was being hunted by a politicized campaign. In a private meeting, he growled to his legal counsel, "I only followed procedure. Those others are actors." The lawyer said nothing, placing before Samuel a file with 5 reopened cases, including that of a 10-year-old boy detained for suspicious behavior while playing in a park. Samuel's mental state unraveled. He suffered insomnia, avoided media, and withdrew from all communication platforms. Still, he saw himself as a victim, believing it was a trap laid by Athena. While filling a mandatory feedback form, he wrote in red ink, "I am prosecuted for daring to act against rioters." He never once mentioned the word sorry. One of the most shocking cases was Leona Watts's. She had been detained by Samuel while sitting in the courthouse lobby, waiting for her mother to collect divorce papers. The reason recorded was non-cooperation, signs of disturbance. At a press conference hosted by the supporting lawyers' organization, Leona appeared calm, holding a copy of the arrest warrant from that day. "I am not here to reclaim lost time," she said to the camera. "I am here to tell him I am still standing and no longer afraid of him." Media coverage deepened. Articles focused less on Samuel's name and more on the mechanism that allowed him to exist unpunished for so long. A local newspaper headline read, "Not everyone in uniform deserves the badge." On the day Samuel was first summoned to civil court, the atmosphere was completely different from when he had entered courts as an enforcer. No preferential seating, no respectful glances from colleagues. He sat in courtroom number 2, beside his private lawyer, hands on the table, eyes vacant toward Athena, observing from afar. Behind him, no one spoke. In front of him were files he once shredded, now reprinted, bound, numbered, and tagged, ready to be presented. He no longer had immunity or official status, only the defendant facing faces from his past, those he once believed would never return. The upheaval caused by exposing Samuel Hayes not only rattled the media, but created a heavy silence within the Eastbrook County Police Force. Those who served alongside him, from the tactical unit to dispatch, remained silent. Faces that once laughed loudly in meetings and shook their hands after patrols were now eerily quiet. Some quietly took extended leave, a few were reassigned amid investigations, while most chose to forget or pretend ignorance. Samuel realized this not when the press published reports, but when his first messages went unanswered. He texted Tony, who had stood with him during a controversial parking lot arrest 3 years prior. "That's in the past, remember? Explain it to me." The message showed "send T," but no reply. He emailed 3 others, including Lieutenant Powell, who once defended him in an internal review. No responses, no confirmation, no sign anyone still saw him as a teammate. What Samuel did not expect was Captain Vance Lerner, once his safe checkpoint, being the first to sever contact. Lerner was suspended after a direct annotation was discovered on previously altered files. When asked by the press if he had ever authorized Samuel's personal approach, Lerner bluntly replied, "I do not recall any such meeting." That answer was the final blow to Samuel's remaining faith. He looked at a leaked recording in which he said, "No action happens without covert orders." Now, those words hung in space with no witness, as if never uttered. In the following days, Samuel lived like a stateless man within the very institution he once called family. He was not expelled from Eastbrook, but no one mentioned his name. Group photos were removed from the memorial board. His personnel file was closed and inaccessible. Even an internal newsletter mentioning him in a street violence prevention campaign was withdrawn. He was neither honored nor condemned, gradually erased from collective memory. Each time he read the news, Samuel searched for any comment from former colleagues, negative or opposing, just to confirm he once existed in their memory, but there was only silence and indifference. He began doubting whether those years were real or just an illusion created by the system to make him believe he mattered. In a brief interview before the second civil trial, a reporter asked, "What do you think when no one in the force stands with you?" Samuel paused a few seconds and answered briefly, "I thought I was part of that system, but turns out I was just a temporary shield. When broken, they throw me away." His voice held no resentment or anger, only the dry feeling of someone emerging from a great fire with nothing left to save and no one waiting. When the cameras turned off, Samuel walked away. Behind him, the entire institution that once protected him had closed its doors. Ahead were confrontations, no longer shaped by justice, but reflections of what he had sown. The atmosphere inside the federal building that morning was markedly different from usual. Security was tightened, entrances and exits were strictly controlled, and courtrooms and side corridors were staffed with supervisors. On the 6th floor, a temporary meeting room was converted into a special hearing center, equipped with a long table, whiteboards, and discrete recording systems. The federal inspector's office had officially announced an expanded multi-agency investigation after receiving documents, videos, transcripts, and system data from 3 independent sources: Judge Athena Carter, technician Kevin Tran, and Secretary Tracy Monroe. The initial files were re-examined by a group of independent technicians from Washington. They traced timestamps, editing marks, and hidden layers of data that had been deleted or corrupted. Within 3 days, the list of tampered files was updated hourly, most related to anonymous complaints or cases closed quickly, with the reason an insufficient basis for extended investigation. Each data entry matched a name, an event, and an unanswered question. A particularly notable pattern emerged. Many files shared the same approver, actions taken within the same time frame, yet the account names had been deleted from the system beforehand. Tiny data revealed the edits originated from a fixed access point inside the department responsible for ethical oversight. This was no longer negligence, but a deliberate operating mechanism concealed behind precise administrative procedure. Pressure rapidly spread throughout the mid-level command staff. Names mentioned in Athena's and Tracy's priority list were separated for deeper investigation. Some cited health reasons to withdraw, while others immediately contacted lawyers and requested to postpone questioning. The evasions only strengthened the investigation's conclusion. A class of insiders had long lived in the shadows of the department and was now coming into the light. While the data was being analyzed, a former internal auditor sent the Secretariat a recording of a meeting held 2 years prior between regional commanders. The deep voice, identified as the department's supervising captain, was heard saying, "Internal matters should be handled internally. Public disclosure is the fastest way for the whole department to lose face." This statement was taken as key evidence, opening the big question: was the cover-up not merely individual but an ingrained policy? The federal inspector expanded the scope to the Internal Ethics Office, responsible for approving cases involving impact on the force's image. In 3 days, over 20 hastily closed files were sealed. Instead of being sent to department supervisors as usual, this list was sent directly to the federal prosecutor, marked "Emergency Handling with Oversight." The media quickly caught up. News outlets that had previously hesitated to cover police cases began using stronger headlines. "An unprecedented purge. Federal court investigates systemic abuse of power. Protection map revealed from a hallway assault case." Each headline cutting open the thick shell surrounding what was once considered an untouchable machine. Athena was invited to a closed meeting at the Investigation Council's headquarters. She said nothing, no long explanations. On the meeting table lay a folder containing statements, timelines, and connections between the Jamal Robinson case and a series of blurred files. She took handwritten notes, clear and concise. Each fact was a brick building a wall of evidence strong enough that the system could no longer deny. When the meeting ended, Athena gathered her papers quietly and greeted each member: a council member, A famously taciturn, gray-haired man approached and said, "Enough, you may not try to change the department, but now the department must change because of you." Athena said nothing, but in her calm gaze was an unspoken certainty. Something had shifted, and this time it would not stop at a reprimand. The hearing room was minimalist, low-ceilinged, with neutral lighting creating a cold and uncomfortable neutrality. On the table was a thick printout detailing the files approved by Captain Vance Lerner, once seen as a symbol of discipline and control in the force. Now he sat facing 3 federal inspectors, his face composed, but his hands clenched tightly under the table. The lead interrogator got straight to the point. "We have 4 complaints handled by Officer Samuel Hayes, approved for closure within 10 minutes of receipt. Each file bears your electronic signature." Lerner nodded. "I signed." "Did you read the content of each complaint during that time?" The questioner's tone was steady, without accusation. "I relied on summaries from the records team. They had handled similar cases many times. I trusted they did it correctly." Another member slowly flipped to the next page. "One case had an attached audio file with technical errors but was still closed and classified as no violations detected. Who decided that?" "I was told the file was unnecessary as the content was just an emotional reaction from the complainant. I trust my staff to act reasonably." Lerner looked up, eyes unflinching. "I don't think anyone deliberately did wrong." His words failed to ease the room. Behind the glass, 2 former heads of the Internal Audit Office were summoned. One refused to provide information, citing mental health issues, while the other inadvertently revealed a fatal slip. "I recall someone telling me to avoid Hayes cases. He was prioritized due to a clean record." The statement was immediately recorded. The council demanded the extraction of all internal emails related to personnel coordination meetings over the past 5 years. Meanwhile, the list of investigations halted midway kept growing. At least 11 cases showed signs of administrative interference, 7 directly connected to those on Athena's submitted protection list. Each case was a fracture in the once impervious structure of the department, a structure now tilting under the light. Data Center played a clip of a recording provided by Tracy Monroe, her voice slightly trembling. "I once submitted the name of an assaulted victim, but the next morning that name vanished from the system. It wasn't a technical error. Someone intervened." The room fell silent. Several administrative officers lowered their heads more than usual. Without words, it was clear. The suspected problem, long suspected, was confirmed. The system was not broken due to lack of oversight, but because it had been controlled for too long by the wrong hands. The hearing closed amidst urgency. The Justice Department promptly issued a statement to the entire force. A comprehensive review would begin within 6 months, reassessing all complaints hastily closed or lacking clear grounds in the past 10 years. Anyone involved in the approval process would have to clarify responsibility regardless of rank or timing. That afternoon, Athena returned to her office. On the whiteboard were sheets densely filled with text. Kevin had organized columns: complainant name, submission date, case, and file status. Some cells were crossed out in red, others highlighted in black marker. Yet what caught Athena's attention most were the names previously deleted, now fully restored. No more codes, no more Citizen A, no more unknown. She stepped closer, touching a familiar name. The elderly man Samuel had questioned before in the parking lot. Below was a note: "Identity restored, file under re-examination." She neither smiled nor relaxed. The only feeling was a strange silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of things finally beginning to be called by their true names. The atmosphere in the federal building that morning was completely different from usual. Security was heightened, entrances and exits were strictly checked, and courtrooms as well as side corridors were staffed with supervisors. On the 6th floor, a temporary meeting room had been converted into a special hearing center. equipped with a long table, whiteboards, and discrete recording systems. The Federal Inspector's Office officially announced the expansion of a cross-agency investigation after receiving documents, videos, transcripts, and system data from 3 independent sources: Judge Athena Carter, Technician Kevin Tran, and Secretary Tracy Monroe. The initial files were re-examined by an independent group of technicians from Washington. They traced timestamps, edit marks, hidden layers of data previously deleted or corrupted by system errors. Within 3 days, the list of tampered files was updated hourly, mostly related to complaints with anonymous senders, or quickly closed with the reason a sufficient basis for further investigation. Each data line corresponded to a person's name, an event, and a question never answered. A series of unusual signs drew attention. Many files were approved by the same person within the same time frame, yet the account names had been deleted from the system beforehand. Micro-level data indicated that the editing commands were issued from a fixed access point inside the Ethics Inspection Department. This was no longer negligence, but a deliberate operating mechanism disguised by precise administrative procedures. Pressure quickly spread to the entire mid-level command team. Names previously mentioned in Athena and Tracy's priority list were singled out for deeper investigation. Some cited health reasons to withdraw, while others immediately contacted lawyers and requested postponement of hearings. This avoidance strengthened the investigative council's conclusion there was a class that had long lived in the shadows of the institution, now beginning to come to light. While data was being analyzed, a former internal auditor sent a recording to the Secretariat. It captured a secret meeting 2 years prior among regional commanders. In the recording, the deep voice of a confirmed Sector Chief Supervisor was heard. Internal matters should be resolved internally. Public disclosure is the quickest way to disgrace the entire force. That statement became evidence, raising a critical question. Was the cover-up not just personal but an implicit policy? The federal inspector expanded the investigation to the Internal Ethics Department, responsible for approving cases with impact on the force's image. Over 3 days, more than 20 hastily closed files were sealed. Instead of being sent to sector supervisors as usual, this list was directly transferred to the federal prosecutor with the code Emergency Monitored Handling. The media quickly picked up the pace. News outlets that had been cautious about police cases began running stronger headlines. Unprecedented purge underway. Federal court launches systemic abuse investigation. Protection map revealed from hallway assault case. Each headline felt like a knife cutting through the thick shell surrounding a supposedly untouchable apparatus. Athena was invited to attend a closed session at the Investigation Council's headquarters. She did not speak or provide lengthy presentations. On the meeting table, she placed a file containing testimonies, timelines, and connection lines between the Jamal Robinson case and the blurred file chain. She took handwritten notes with clear, concise points. Each fact was a brick contributing to a wall of evidence solid enough that the system could not deny. When the meeting ended, Athena quietly gathered her papers and greeted each person. An older council member, known for being taciturn, approached her and said, "Enough. You may not have tried to change the force, but now the force will have to change because of you." Athena did not respond, but in her calm gaze was an unspoken certainty. Something had shifted, and this time it would not stop at a reprimand. The hearing room was designed minimally, with a low ceiling and neutral lighting, creating an uncomfortably cold and neutral atmosphere. On the table lay a thick printout detailing files approved by Captain Vance Lerner, once a symbol of standards and disciplined control within the force. Now he sat opposite 3 federal inspectors, his face calm but his hands gripping the underside of the table. The chair leading the questioning did not mince words. "We have 4 complaint files handled by Officer Samuel Hayes, approved and closed less than 10 minutes after receipt. Each file bears your digital signature." Lerner nodded. "I signed. Did you read the content of each complaint during that time?" The questioner's voice remained even, without emotion. "I relied on summary reports from the file supervisors. They had handled similar cases many times. I trusted they acted properly." Another member slowly turned the next page. "One case has an attached audio file that was technically corrupted, but was still closed and classified as no misconduct found. Who made that decision? I was informed the file was unnecessary as its content was just an emotional reaction from the complainant. I trust my staff to do the right thing. Lerner looked up, eyes unflinching. I don't believe anyone intentionally did wrong. Those words failed to calm the room. Behind the glass, 2 former internal audit heads from the previous term were also summoned. One refused to provide information, citing unstable mental health. The other accidentally revealed a fatal slip. I recall someone telling me to avoid Hayes. He was prioritized due to a clean record. The statement was immediately recorded. The council demanded the extraction of all internal emails related to personnel coordination meetings over the past 5 years. Meanwhile, the list of interrupted investigations continued to grow. At least 11 cases bore signs of administrative interference, 7 directly linked to those in the covert protection list Athena submitted. Each case was a fracture in the seemingly inviolable structure of the force, a structure now tilting under the light. The data center played a recording excerpt provided by Tracy Monroe, her voice trembling slightly. I once submitted the name of an assault victim, but the next morning the name vanished from the system. It was not a technical error. Someone intervened. The room fell silent. Several administrative officials lowered their heads more than usual. No one needed to speak, but it was clear. What had long been suspected was confirmed. The system was broken not from lack of oversight, but because it had been controlled by someone too long. The hearing closed amid a series of emergencies. The Department of Justice promptly issued a statement to the entire force. A comprehensive review would begin within 6 months, including reassessment of hastily closed or insufficiently substantiated complaints over the past 10 years. Those involved in the review process would have to clarify responsibilities, regardless of rank or timing. That afternoon, Athena returned to her office. The whiteboard was covered with A3 sheets densely filled with text. Kevin had arranged columns: complainant's name, submission date, case, and file status. Some cells were crossed out in red, a few lines highlighted with fluorescent ink. But at the center of that information wall was what Athena cared most about: names previously deleted, now clearly restored. No longer coded, no Citizen A, no unidentified. She stepped closer, her hand touching a familiar name: the elderly man questioned by Samuel near the parking lot. Below was a note: identity restored, file under re-examination. She did not smile or sigh with relief. The only feeling was a strange silence. No longer the silence of fear, but the silence of final truths, beginning to be called by their real names. Samuel Hayes lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor of an old building just a few blocks from downtown. Since being suspended and permanently stripped of his authority, he had moved there, cutting off contact with most of his old acquaintances. But what he could not cut off was social media, the press, and the media, those that still named him daily in various ways. Evening news, investigative podcasts, YouTube videos with catchy titles like From Badge to Infamy, The Fall of Hayes. Everything escalated faster than he expected. His home address was leaked in an anonymous comment. An old photo, him standing at an industry conference, raising a certificate, was edited and titled A Fallen Icon. At first, there were only a few strange looks in supermarkets, then hurried secret photos at gas stations. A few days later, someone knocked on his door at night, leaving a folded note on the handle. You think the title is forever? Those who once patted him on the shoulder in the office hallway fell silent. Calling his legal advisor only reached an automated message. Sent texts were left unanswered. Returned emails bounced with mail undeliverable. The apartment gradually became a bunker. Samuel pulled curtains over every window, double-locked the door whenever inside, and added a chain even when the door was closed tightly. He could not sleep deeply. Every car brake sound from the street startled him. A single doorbell ring made him stand pressed against the wall for hours, afraid to look through the peephole. He began recording in a small notebook reporter names, their appearance times, and suspicious license plates. In his mind, he mapped out who was against him, including reporters, former complainants, and even old colleagues who once nodded in meetings. One weekday, Samuel stood by the sink, his gaunt face staring at himself in the mirror, red eyes from lack of sleep, dry lips, wrinkled collar. He muttered, "I was once commended. I was once trusted." A light knock came from the glass door to the living room. He rushed out, lifted the curtain. No one was there. But from downstairs, a neighbor secretly recorded him shouting into the phone, "You don't understand. I was praised. I was honored." That clip spread like wildfire. It appeared on TikTok, set to mocking music, edited into parody videos about the decay of power. Channels that once feared his name now treated him as entertainment. The next morning, as rain began to fall, a package was left at his door. No sender address. Samuel sat dazed for hours before opening it. Inside was a copy of the complaint, the first one filed against him 5 years and 8 months ago. The sender was a black citizen from Riverside, a victim of an unexpected administrative check that Samuel once deemed insignificant. Attached was a handwritten note. "Do you remember this face?" Samuel gripped the note tightly, eyes fixed on the familiar name, now heavy as a blade. No signature. No one needed one. The paper said enough. He understood very well. For the first time, he could not blame anyone else. What he thought had been erased was now coming back, not by gunfire or verdicts, but through memories, faces, words, reports he once signed or pretended to ignore. Power fell, the badge gone, but those actions, as he once said, were recorded by the system taught to him, seemingly secret but never clean. Now, the consequences were knocking step by step. As evening fell, dim light filtered through thin curtains, casting a dull gray over the apartment. Samuel curled up on a wooden chair near the kitchen, wearing an old t-shirt stained with coffee from breakfast. The apartment was silent, except for the steady ticking of the clock, marking slow, deliberate beats. Just as he was about to stand and brew some cold tea, the doorbell rang. A sharp, decisive sound, neither long nor hurried. Samuel held his breath, moved toward the door, peered through the peephole. Outside stood a medium-hidden black man in his early 40s, wearing a fully buttoned dark blue shirt. In his hand was a folded sheet of paper. No briefcase, no camera, no sign of press or legal threats. His face was calm, gaze steady and unflinching. Samuel did not open the door. He stood there nearly 10 minutes, shifting weight, fingers lightly touching the metal latch. The man stayed motionless, neither lifting his phone nor leaving. Then, as if pulled by an unnamed force, Samuel cracked the door, leaving just a hand's width open. His eyes locked onto the visitor. "I'm not here for revenge," the man said first, his voice low but clear. He held out the paper, a worn copy of an old complaint, the name printed clearly at the top, Marcus J. Lyle. "I used to think I'd never forgive, but today I stand here, not because of you, but for myself." Samuel clenched the doorframe, eyes fixed on the familiar name. The complaint had been removed from the system 29 hours after submission. He vaguely remembered that night, a surprise inspection, forced kneeling before the patrol car, the woman's eyes inside, and the child behind the glass. Marcus continued without changing tone. "I lost my job a week later, diagnosed as easily agitated, unfit for social welfare work. My wife changed jobs. My son, he feared police so much that whenever he saw a uniform, he cried. For 5 whole years." Samuel was speechless. The words stuck in his throat. He did not know what to say. Sorry sounded hollow. I don't remember was cruel, and it was procedure was a knife. He bowed his head, eyes stinging, not with tears, but with a cold feeling spreading from his chest down his arms. Marcus lowered his hand, put the complaint back in his pocket. He stepped back, his gaze neither resentful nor pitying. "I have forgiven, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to imprison myself in hatred any longer. Forgiveness does not erase wounds, but I choose to move on." He turned, walking down the hallway, his silhouette fading toward the stairs. Before disappearing from sight, he stopped and said without looking back, "When you have nothing left to hold on to, I hope you know what loss of freedom feels like I have known for over 10 years." The door closed, and the lock clicked softly. Samuel stood motionless, back against the wall. The room was still stifling, curtains still drawn, lights still off, but inside him a crack opened, small, yet enough to let through the echo of something he had never named. Not redemption, not atonement, just the first time he felt clearly that the scariest thing was not losing rank or power, but being forced to face everything when there was nothing left to hide behind. And there he saw himself, bare and alone. The sixth-floor meeting room was brightly lit with white lights. On the table lay analysis files from the state investigative team, a draft of the interagency report, and a list of nominees for the new federal judgeship term. Athena stood by the glass window, gazing down at the distant parking lot where, months ago, she had been publicly humiliated without anyone speaking up. Yet today no one asks who she was. She had won, at least on paper. Samuel had been removed from the force, civil lawsuits were ongoing, and the system had to acknowledge its flaws. But at what cost? For more than 12 weeks, she had not returned home before midnight. Anonymous calls flooded in. Silent glances were cast in elevators, and many former colleagues shifted to a cautious stance. She was offered an extension of her special term with expanded supervisory authority, meaning she had to stay. Yet it also meant confronting unseen powers, calls from the governor's office, and tightening isolation. Athena sat down and opened an internal letter from the state Supreme Court office. Among the notes was the line, "If you choose to withdraw, no one will judge you. Sometimes one voice is enough." She read it repeatedly. Was it really enough? That afternoon, she visited the Community Legal Support Center, introduced by Jamal. Without notice, she stood among simple study desks, listening to a discussion about constitutional rights for detainees. A young student said, "The police cannot hold you too long without a valid reason." Everyone nodded, but an elderly woman spoke up. "They still do it because they think no one knows the law." Athena moved toward the back of the room without an introduction. Only when Jamal looked back and his eyes lit up did the room realize who had entered. She said simply, "I came to listen." After the talk, Jamal quietly asked, "Will you continue?" She did not answer immediately. They stepped outside. Dusk had fallen. The wind swept through the red-tiled corridor, footsteps echoing. "Sometimes I feel like a tightrope walker," Athena said. "Below is an abyss, but no one sees the rope." Jamal was silent for a moment, then replied, "You walk the rope not because you're forced, but because you know if no one dares to step first, no one dares to follow." That phrase was a small milestone, not changing everything, but calming the chaos inside Athena. On her home desk, an invitation to teach at the Legal Academy awaited her signature. That evening, she returned to the office, turned off all lights except a small desk lamp. The final file had been approved. In it, she proposed a mandatory training program on response procedures, behavior monitoring, and nonviolent skills for all new officers. No one forced her to do it. No one promised it would pass. But she wrote it knowing that if she did not, the next person might not have the courage to begin. As she stepped out of the building, Athena looked back at the silent row of high-floor windows. She had not made a final decision yet. But one thing was clear. Whether she continued or withdrew, she would never let her voice disappear within a system that once chose silence. The scholarship ceremony took place in the main hall of the state university, where soft light spread over neatly arranged seats, and the stage was decorated with banners honoring justice and resilience. Unlike the usual solemn atmosphere, today the hall carried something unnamed, something gentle yet profound, like an unspoken recognition of those who had endured the system's blows and still stood tall. Jamal Robinson's name was announced near the ceremony's end for the Honorary Law Scholarship, awarded to students who faced injustice and never gave up on their dreams. He stepped up to the podium with a composed gait, wearing a dark suit and simple tie. No one in the audience called him a victim anymore. Today, he was the chosen one. Applause rang steadily as Jamal received his certificate and bowed his head. When invited to speak, he paused for a moment before beginning with a simple sentence, "I once thought I had no one by my side." He did not mention any officer's name, nor the cold stone corrido, nor the suffocating feeling of being pinned down before a crowd, but the audience understood. He continued, "I was helped by someone, just when I needed it most. That person didn't say much, didn't explain anything to me, they just did what needed to be done, and that was enough to keep me going." Once again, applause rose, this time with something more sincere and light, as if acknowledging those who had witnessed injustice, without knowing how to speak out. At the back row, Athena Carter sat quietly, anonymous, with no official role in the ceremony. She wore no judicial robe, only a long coat and a thin scarf wrapped around her neck. She watched Jamal from afar without tears or pride. She knew she had saved no one. She simply did not look away. When Jamal left the stage, his eyes met hers. Neither spoke. No thanks were needed. No promises exchanged. Just a slight nod, then each turned to their own path. One continued learning to bring change. The other gradually withdrew from the spotlight to quietly reflect. On her way home, Athena walked past the old Eastbrook courthouse, the site of cold trials, unnamed reviews, and the first encounter that began everything to change. The stone steps remained the same, the gray walls unchanged, but something inside her was different. The aftershock remained, not the shattering sound of the system, but the echo of something growing, though still fragile. Athena paused for a few seconds, looking up at the third-floor window where the first reprimand meeting was held. The wind brushed softly across her shoulders. She smiled, not for victory, but because, for the first time in a long while, she believed something had changed. The late afternoon office fell silent as Athena closed the last file and looked out through the frosted glass at the gray sky, heavy with clouds. She pulled out a blank sheet and a dark brown pen, beginning to write a letter addressed to the one who will sit in this seat after me. Her handwriting was neat, carrying the weight of her journey. She did not write about duties or procedures, but about why someone stays despite feeling alone. She hoped the future occupant would come with clarity, that this seat was neither for wielding power nor seeking safety. Athena recalled her first day in the Eastbrook courtroom, where suspicion met her gaze. She understood then that silence was often a choice, a way to avoid confrontation or losing comfort. She wrote that many would question whether speaking out was foolish. She once thought so too. She described how there would be days of utter loneliness, no support in the courtroom, no one standing beside you. But such moments reveal if you remain true to yourself. Falling under such pressure was not failure, but a sign of standing for what was right. As the room darkened, Athena continued writing, reflecting on times she wanted to leave, holding resignation letters in her hands. But she thought of those like Tracy, Malik, and Jamal, people who only needed to know someone had stood up before them. That thought kept her going. After sealing the letter, she wrote the same words on the outside and placed it in her desk drawer. A message not for the system, but for whoever would sit there with a clear conscience. Alone in the quiet, memories surfaced. An investigation closed quickly. A principled investigator forced out after reporting abuse. The silence that followed leaving a painful void. Athena admitted she had stayed silent then, feeling powerless, but that silence only deepened the problem. She whispered to herself that silence was not accidental, but created by isolating those who dared question and labeling them troublemakers. She questioned whether the system sought true justice or only punished the vulnerable. Despite moments when she considered quitting to escape cold stares and lonely corridors, she recalled Jamal's calm face upon receiving his scholarship and Tracy quietly handing over old files. Malik's small act of defiance also inspired her. Athena stayed not because she was stronger, but because if everyone left when feeling alone, no one would remain to resist wrongdoing. She poured a glass of water, gazed out at the courthouse lights, and knew that beneath all procedures, someone awaited a brave successor. If her letter could offer even a faint, guiding light, then enduring the loneliness was not in vain. Today's courtroom was unlike any before. It was not because the seats were fully occupied or the unusual silence as the doors opened, but because the person stepping onto the defense stand was a name once pushed up against a stone wall: Jamal Robinson. He wore a dark suit with an earth-toned tie, holding a neat file as steady as his steps into the room. There were no slogans or declarations, just someone who once remained silent, now speaking on behalf of those who could not. The presiding judge was young, but his eyes showed he had thoroughly studied the files. The plaintiff's side represented an internal complaint, a case from 5 years ago involving a forced action without a clear procedure. This time, no one was silenced. The data was complete, witnesses summoned properly, and Jamal's lawyer was there to defend the right to speak out. Athena sat quietly in the back row. Without her black robe, notes, or entourage, she sat alone. Her hair was tied neatly, eyes fixed on the opposite stand. Some recognized her, others did not, but no one dared ignore that sharp gaze, the same one she had when she first entered courtroom 7, holding the hallway video clip and saying, "I demand suspension of duty." Jamal presented his points clearly, each argument polished in silence. He cited clauses not to overpower the opposition, but to remind the system of its own principles. He referenced past trials and excerpts from hidden verdicts. At one point, he paused and said, "I once thought justice was a lamp hung too high to reach. Then I met someone who dared name the wrongs even when the entire room turned their backs on her. Today, I stand here, not because I am right, but because someone once helped me stop bowing my head." Athena showed no expression, but her hands were clasped tightly. No one heard her breath, yet the atmosphere seemed to focus on her presence. The court clerk flipped a notebook page with a slight tremble. Perhaps they all felt this trial was no longer isolated. It was the answer to a long-suspended question: is there anyone patient enough to keep the flame of justice burning, even after stepping away from power? When Jamal finished, he turned briefly to the back row, his gaze passing Athena as a silent thank you. She responded with a slow nod, the nod of someone who knows when to step back for the next generation. The trial continued, but for Athena, the true story had reached its conclusion. Not a victory or defeat, but a transfer, from one who stood amid the storm to those who dared to stand tall afterward. Thus, the end was not silence, but the echo of what had once been suffocated. Thank you for following our channel. Every view, every share, and every comment from you is a source of motivation that drives us to keep delivering content that is meaningful, authentic, and socially impactful. We believe that stories are not just for entertainment. They can spark reflection, ignite courage, and inspire real change. We are committed to continuously improving, curating, and investing in high-quality content. From stories of justice to social issues, human dignity, and voices that have long been overlooked. If this content made you think or moved you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and stay with us on this journey to amplify truth and justice. Let each subscription be a small step toward a more compassionate and fair society.